A distinguished lecture series in the afternoon. So this morning we tried early and also in combination with the machine learning coffee seminar. And so as some of you know, this distinguished lecture series talk is organized by the Helsinki Institute for Information Technology across the two universities, Aalto University and University of Helsinki. And today we have an exceptional speaker, and I must also thank the city of Espoo. Alonso is here to represent, for having brought us this exceptional speaker. Maybe before introducing the speaker, I'd just like the city of Espoo to say maybe just a couple of words, as I'm at least very curious to know how come they get so exceptional speakers to come to Espoo. Alonso, thank you.
Hi, Alfonso Gutierrez here. Yes, okay. Alfonso Gutierrez, I'm dealing with a strategic partnership for the Espoo Innovation Garden Ecosystem, meaning where all the startups, the university is located, and BTT and so forth. And basically our job is to get international speakers and also corporates involved in the ecosystem. So we can help the companies to grow. And actually with Alon we met some time ago in California when we made a proposal to NASA and also to Google as well, with actually Aalto University. So it's a pleasure to have Alon here. And one thing that also is nice, we timed it so well that Alon this evening can experience what happens in Finland when Finland wins the gold medal. And so we'll be there in the center of Helsinki today. And so with that, I will leave the floor to Alon, and thank you for being here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I said this is an exceptional speaker, so I want to explain why I think this is a really exceptional speaker. Alon Halevy is, I think, talented in so many ways, looking at his CV, as he has done everything, at least I try to do in my career. So being successful academically with an incredible impact into research, especially in the fields of database and data integration, but also has been successful with startups and has had a very important impact in the industry, in large industry. So really, and has also written some popular books. So I don't know. I don't know what else to add. Have you won the Olympics or something? No. Okay.
Julie, one more thing.
Yes.
Just one more thing. So Alon, in the afternoon at 4 o'clock at EAT Digital, he will be talking from the business side in terms of basically how he grew up a startup and sold it to a nice little company called Google. So he'll be sharing more on a kind of fireside chat session at 4 o'clock at EIT Digital next door. Thanks.
That was interesting. So because of course that gives you an opportunity to hear about all these incredible things. And Alon has been professor at the University of Washington. First he, of course, received a PhD degree from Stanford, and after having been in Washington and having, let's say, founded Transforming, one of the startups that had been acquired by Google, then he has spent 10 years at Google. You can read more in the web about what very interesting things his group was doing at Google. One of these things also won a 10 years impact award, the VLDB Impact Award. So really important work. But maybe I'm actually very, very interested myself about the talk, as some of my research is contiguous to this theme. So I'm really very excited and anxious to hear you talk, Alon.
Thank you.
Then you have, I think, a microphone on, and I'll just let you talk now. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that very, very kind introduction. I'll try to live up to the expectations. So what was not mentioned in the introduction is I'm actually unemployed. Okay, so which is actually a lot of fun. So I'm actually on a very extended vacation. After spending 10 years at Google, I started this lab called Megagon Labs. It's a research lab for a big Japanese company called Recruit, a company you probably never heard about. That's okay. I spent 3 years there until December, and I left at the end of December. And since then, I've been having a good time. Don't worry, I will start working again, probably in August. I don't exactly know where yet. So the place is called Megagon Labs, and the people that you see here are all, they actually did the real work, okay? So I'm going to tell you a story today. I'm going to tell you the story of Megagon Labs. And the story has multiple aspects. One is we started with a problem that is, I would say, hold it, a very, let me do this right.
It's working, it's going to the stream.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to put it in my pocket though. So we started with a problem of how do we create technology for happiness, which is very, very vague. Okay, but it's a great way to inspire people and to get people to work with you. But what happened over those 3 years was that we took that very vague idea, and that idea generated a bunch of very specific projects, very technical projects that we worked on, and we advanced the field. So I think that gives you sort of it's sort of a meta lesson about research, which is we started with a very lofty idea. And the journey of research, you start with an idea, and every 6 months we had another more specific, more targeted idea that we never thought in the beginning that we would actually find. So I think that this happens a lot in data science, where roughly what I do is I do AI, I do databases, which today is just called data science, right? But what actually drives research on data science? Some application, right? You start doing some application, and then you realize that a lot of what was supposed to work doesn't work anymore, or doesn't work in your context, and so then you need to develop new things, okay? But if you're guided by real applications, then you actually discover very, very exciting areas of research. And so this is a general theme in data science and AI today. The other thing I want to point out is that we're talking a lot about AI. Some people will talk about the fact that AI is going to take over our jobs, will take over everything. That's not what, there's also a lot of focus on AI that helps humans, that enhances humans, okay? And that's what we're trying to do with our work on well-being and happiness. So we're starting with an application which is how can technology, in particular AI, help people lead more productive lives that make them happier, okay? Believe me, this is very vague, okay? So don't worry about it. So this is what happened, okay? So we started this, I went up in front of a Japanese board of directors and I said, oh, we're gonna work on happiness. Fortunately, they did not ask me how I'm going to do it, because if they did, I wouldn't know how, okay? I'm still not sure that I know how. But they believed in the problem, and so they said, okay, just hire a bunch of people and start working on it. So I hired a bunch of people that were very excited about the problem, and we started working on a few projects. One is an application called Joe, which I will show you very quickly today. Joe is a smart journal. Joe is something where you record your happy moments, and hopefully the system learns and suggests other things for you, okay? But in order to make Joe work, we had to develop this other thing, a corpus of 100,000 happy moments that we crowdsourced using Amazon Mechanical Turk, which gave us a resource to do research on natural language processing. How do people talk about happiness? How do people talk about their happy moments? There was no data about this, so we created some data, and now that's been used in a bunch of research. But what I'm going to focus more on today is suppose you had a system that knew what you liked, okay, knew what kinds of experiences you like to have in life. Now it tried to find these experiences for you, to help you create these experiences. Turns out that the search systems that we have today are terrible at searching for experiences. Try planning a trip somewhere, okay? The experience that you're trying to get in a trip, you can't actually find on the web today. You have to work really, really, really hard, okay? So we created this, this demonstration of, we call it Voyageur, obviously, because it's a travel application. It's an experience search engine. We demonstrated it last week at the World Wide Web Conference. No, it's called something else, the web conference. And the actual technical problem that we had to solve in order to make that work is something that is called a subjective database system. So I'm going to talk about all this today. Okay? And please, I know I don't have to say this in Finland, but stop me when you have questions. Okay? I know you will. So one of the things that I did, my entire team did. So again, now one point. I don't work for Megagon anymore, so I can say anything I want. Okay? And except for the stuff that I promised in the legal document not to say. And I do not speak for the Megagon work anymore. So some of this work is going to take different directions, and I'm going to take a different direction. And so whatever I say, do not assume that this is something that Megagon is going to do. Okay? There's a field of psychology called positive psychology. Okay? It's actually a very, very exciting field. It's called also the science of happiness. It's what are the activities, what are the ways in which people can actually lead happier lives. Okay, it's about 20, 25 years old. There are a bunch of, in Silicon Valley, when you go, if you can find a bookstore and you go into a bookstore, then the whole entrance is filled with books about happiness. Okay, that's how unhappy we are. Okay, we need to read all these books. And actually, when you read these books about happiness, you get happier because it talks about stuff that should make you happier, and it's cool. Okay, and there's some really good books if you want. I can recommend a bunch. But here is this chart here, kind of summarizes a lot of the research. And this chart is also under some scrutiny right now. But half of your happiness, the green stuff, is your genetics. It's sort of like your weight. Okay, you can lose weight, gain weight, stuff like that. But you have a basic weight that you're going to be around because of your genetics. Same thing with your happiness. Okay, you can win the lottery. Okay, and then after a year or so, you're going to pretty much go back to the same level of happiness you were before the lottery. Same thing if you break a leg or become somehow incapable. There's something about our innate happiness that just stays very similar. About half, okay? And we're not going to go mess around with your genes today, okay? Don't worry about that. 10% of your happiness, and I say only 10%, is what we spend a huge amount of our time doing. Now, I come from America. In America, we spend a huge amount of our time doing. In Europe, I know you have a better balance in your lives, okay? I'm very respectful of that. So it's about how much money you have and how much success you have in your work, in your job, and which car you drive and which house you have, and all the things that you work hard all the time to achieve, okay? But when you buy that new car, okay, after a few months, you sort of get used to that car, okay? It doesn't make you as happy anymore as it did before, okay? So we spend a lot of time working on stuff that actually affects only 10 to 18% of our happiness. The area of potential is that red stuff. It's how we spend our time. That's where you can actually affect your behavior. These are things like meditation and investing in long-term relationships and investing in family relationships and eating well and sleeping well, and all those things that when you accumulated actually make a difference in how you feel. Things like contributing to others, helping others. When you help others, you actually gain a lot of joy. Okay? You just try doing it and it works. So these are the things that if we can remember to do, if we can remember to prioritize, we will be happier. And that's where technology can help, because that's where our natural inclination is to go for the 10%, because there's always another paper to write. There's always a paper that was rejected for some reason and needs to be rewritten, right? There's another idea, there's another thing, there's another stock investment you can make. There are things that you can do that don't actually contribute to your happiness. Take time off, walk in the forest. There's never a necessity to do that, but if you actually do that, you will feel better. Okay, so that's the part that we're addressing. So that's the question. Can technology raise your awareness about how you spend your time? Okay, so we're not, when we started developing Joe, we weren't going to measure your happiness at the end of the day. Okay, this was not an exercise in psychology the way psychology does. Okay, our goal was, this is after many, many, many discussions, don't get me wrong, okay? Our goal was to raise your awareness. If you start thinking about things, right, then maybe you start changing your behavior. Okay? It's like when you're driving down, you say, okay, have you ever seen any blue cars? All of a sudden you start realizing so many blue cars out there because you're aware of the fact that there are blue cars and you're looking for them. Okay, so if you're aware of the decisions that you're making and their consequences, then you will actually spend more time doing the things that have a chance of making you happier. Okay? So it becomes a technology play. It becomes, can we create something that raises your awareness, that pushes you to do certain things? Okay? So now, Joe is an experiment. It's actually in the App Store, but I'm not sure it's in the App Store. I know it's not in the App Store in Europe because of the whatchamacallit, the four-letter acronym. They might work on it, they might do it, but it's an experiment. So you shouldn't. The idea is take the ideas of Joe and think that maybe they can be implemented somewhere else in some tool that you already use every day. Okay, but let's look at the key ideas. So here is an example of Joe. Actually, I used Joe for 2 years. I now don't use it, mostly because I don't know where it's going, but I really miss it. Okay, so the idea with Joe is you reflect on your moments. You go through your day, and you have moments that make you happy, you write them down. If there's a photo that you can attach, you attach a photo. So this is not completely randomly selected, but this is from my Joe stream. So, oh, look at this. I had a dream where I dreamt about my son. And I remember in the dream just becoming flooded with happiness. I got up in the morning. It's pretty cool that I remembered it, but I wrote it down. Or I took my team to, my Megagon team to Iguazu Falls in Brazil before a conference last year. We had a fabulous time. Okay, it's a beautiful place. You should all go there. I run a lot, so every time I write this down. I get coffee gifts. I garden, actually. I have lavenders in my front yard, and yes?
At this point, I would like to know, is this meant to be a personal logo or something you showed to your friends?
Great question. So this is very personal, except you're now my best friends, okay? Don't worry, I know that the people at the lab can see the data if they want to, so I'm very careful about what I wrote down. But no, it's actually a great question, because if you think of all the social networks, this is the social network of one person. This is what you share with yourself, and therefore you will write much more personal things. So I don't think I would post any of these things on Facebook. Okay, maybe the Iguazu Falls, because it was so friggin' awesome. Okay. So these are just things that I'd like to remember, and I look at this, and even now I'm talking about this. I'm looking at this. Wow, this is pretty cool. You get happier just by remembering recalling some of your happy moments. Okay. So this is what Joe is about. You write these things down. Okay. And the first benefit is just reflection. You just look at this, and what Joe does is it does some analysis of these moments. So in positive psychology, they identify this concept of values. Values are things that you live by, like physical well-being. You do this every day, okay? Or gratitude, or family. Family is a value, right? You spend time with your family in various ways. Values are not goals, okay? A goal is something you achieve and you move on, like a PhD, okay? You never move on from your family, okay? You're stuck with them. It's something that you do every day. It's like the GPS of your life. These are the things that you want to do a lot of, okay? So what Joe does, and this is where some of the natural language processing comes in, is it maps these moments. You write down, I just spent time with my son. It'll map that to family, okay? Maybe family, maybe emotional intimacy, or whatever it is. So now it's giving you this beautiful bar chart, or whatever chart, that shows you a little bit on how you spend your time. So it gives you a little bit of reflection, okay? Turns out that's actually a pretty hard problem to map these moments, because they're so different, they're so varied, and they're actually extremely subjective. What is family and what is, well, family is easy. But socializing versus emotional intimacy, we've had hours and hours of discussion of this at the lab. Okay, it identifies the people that you mention in your moments. So who are the people that are mentioned in my happy moments? That's actually a useful thing to know. The thing is, this is not rocket science, right? It's just like keeping track of these little details, right, is useful when you start aggregating them over time.
Where do the values come from?
So we worked with a psychologist. She started with 90. We got down to 17. Yeah, so they're guided by psychological knowledge. Yeah.
Would seeing these breakdowns actually make people think more, more positive, or rather more guilty that they don't achieve certain goals that they set for themselves?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's very personal, right? Some people will feel guilty no matter what they do. But if you feel guilty and then you take action, then then at least you have some data to back up either your guilt or your satisfaction, or maybe you just and think of this as the beginning, right? If this is just aggregating what you did, but think of if the system can start giving you suggestions, or maybe, and you can set goals. You can say, I want to make sure I have 5 social moments or significant social interactions every week. And so now you can actually work towards those goals, and the app will actually track it for you. So you can choose which goals to set and work on them. Okay? But you're right, it's like all of this, it raises your awareness. What you do with it and how you further manipulate you is still open. We actually put in some pointers to other readings. So if you had a moment of gratitude, maybe it'll send you an article or send you to an article about gratitude. What's going on here? Yeah, meditation. And it also tries a lot of the things that you do. You want to make plans. So Joe helps you make plans for how to do certain things. So the typical example is, I have lunch with a friend, okay, and I say, I really enjoyed this, okay. I should do this again at least in a month from now, okay. But oftentimes you say that to yourself and then you forget, and then 6 months pass by and you haven't met that friend, okay. If you can tell Joe, say, okay, in a month from now, remind me. It's not a particular date. You're not putting it on a calendar and making a commitment for a month from now. But it's things that you wanted to do that Joe will remind you to do them. So it's things that shouldn't fall between the cracks. Okay, that's the way to think about it. Again, there are the thing about Joe is it only generates questions, right? Very few answers. So a lot of the things that we had to develop in Joe just raised some fascinating research questions. So one of them was, there's a question of whether Joe should only take your happy moments or your unhappy moments as well, or any moments, right? You should be able to write anything down, right? So Joe needs to recognize a happy moment from an unhappy moment. You'd think sentiment analysis would do that? No. Happy moments are much more, they don't use necessarily words that a sentiment analyzer would actually find to be excited. No, I felt it was great to see my son do this and that. That's not going to be recognized as a happy, by a sentiment analyzer, won't be recognized as happy. What are the activities that you actually do? So the idea here is maybe Joe will discover that there are certain kinds of activities or certain kinds of activities with certain people that actually make you happy. Okay, like being out in nature. Okay, watching sunset. I found out that I really love sunsets. Okay, so how can you figure out what are the activities that make you happy and suggest more of those? So actually recognizing the activity in a moment is a very hard problem. If I say I went out for let's say somebody says I went out for a dinner with my husband last night. What made you happy? Eating? Eating with your husband? The fact that you got a night away from your kids? which isn't actually mentioned in the text. So what is the level of activity, what is the specificity of the activity, right, that actually is the cause of the happiness? That's a really, really hard problem. When you have an activity and Joe wants to give you suggestions, what things are repeatable? If you come and say, I bought a puppy, I'm really happy. Okay, if Joe came and said, next time say, hey Joe, what should I do? Buy a puppy. Buying a puppy makes you happy. Okay, so now you're going to have 10 puppies. That's not a good idea. So buying a puppy is not a repeatable thing. But taking your son out for a bike ride is very repeatable. How, from a natural language processing point of view, how can you figure out whether something is a repeatable activity, right? Sustainably, you can continue buying puppies, right? But how can what is a sustainable activity that can be repeated?
Question: how deep into the life do you go? I mean, let's say that if you have an argument with your spouse, and then something good turns out of it. You have actually bad things, and some of those are, well, you could call those negative. So how does this fit to that picture?
It's a great question. I don't know. You can. So one comment I can make is I call this the Twitter of journaling. So Joe is a journaling application, but you only write very short moments. What you're describing would be something like that maybe would take a longer journal entry. We had a fight, then we talked about it 2 days later, we worked on this, and so you can actually think of this as a much longer thing. Now, you can summarize anything in a tweet, obviously, right? I mean, people do this. But here the idea is, so far we've looked at relatively simple activities. So I don't have a great answer to your question yet, but that's research. Yeah.
So when you mentioned about suggesting new activities, right? So we are still talking about suggesting new activities from within that person's journal entries. So we are not talking about correlating two different users which might have similar sort of things which make them happy, and then suggesting something which makes the other person happy, but something this person one has not tried, so suggest that. So we are not talking about that yet.
A little bit. So forget about person two, but maybe, so the nice thing about a computer is it's aware of where you are, it's aware of the weather and all your surroundings. So now I came into Helsinki, right? The system should look at all the activities that I did and made me happy and suggest something that is in Helsinki that can make me happy. I actually have, thanks to Alfonso, I have been to Helsinki, but but it's not necessarily something that I reported in the past. It might be something that, given what I reported, should make me happy. Now it also knows that it was raining in Helsinki yesterday. Thank you, by the way. Okay, so I went to the Design Museum. Very nice place. Made me very happy.
I wanted to ask you about the data because, as you're describing, Joe, there's something very sweet about it. It's almost like a diary, or that there's no postering. It's very straightforward and honest and sincere. So since I'm European and I have a background in data protection, I have to ask, who are all the people or companies that have access to the Joe data? Because you see, I said that there's some kind of very non-commercial aspect, or that it mentions like emotional intimacy. So I'm just looking at that. How
only you should have access to it.
Sorry.
Only you should have access to it.
Okay, so it's.
But again,
It's not sold the data, or.
No. So first of all, this is an experimental app. Okay, we're not trying to market it. We're not trying to make money off of it, and it's actually stored, encrypted on the server. Yeah. So no, but the idea is this is data that you only share with yourself, certainly not with anyone else. Yeah. So it would actually be applicable in Europe.
So this is rather interesting and goes into a direction of a problem that has been on my mind lately, which is when it comes to sort of social media, the business model is to make you as sort of angry as possible because that will drive interaction, basically, and advertisement money. And one question I've been thinking about, could it be possible to have a kind of your own agent that would choose what kind of social media things you want to see at this moment? And what you're actually solving is, to my mind, that problem.
Interesting.
Or you could use it to solve that problem and provide people with an agent that can actually say, sort of show them, okay, I want to see work-related things on this area, or I want to see shared stories of happiness from
Right,
people,
right.
or I want to see the political stuff now that I'm in the right frame of mind and so on, which actually gives this larger sort of potential.
That's a really, really good point. I can't speak for any social media companies. But I think it's an interesting question about what is it, when you're looking at your Facebook stream, for example, what is it you're getting from the stream? And if you could direct the, if you can be more directed in what you're trying to get and communicate that with the social media, with the platform, that would be awesome. And you're absolutely right that this, given that you're already reflecting on what you like in your life, right? This can be helpful. So, for example, I may want to spend more time with family. Okay, my family is all over the world, so maybe Facebook should give me stuff about my family more prominently right now. I'll feel good about it. I'll give them a bunch of likes and maybe put a bunch of comments. I don't get angry at my family. That's a rule. And so we could do that. Or maybe I'm interested in travel, and so maybe it can show me posts about people who are traveling that will inspire me to all kinds of ideas. So I think you're right. You should go work at Facebook.
I would be interested to see how the presentation continues.
How's Brett? Okay. Good point. So we developed in order to do research on how people talk about their happy moments. In order to enable Joe to do some analysis, we crowdsourced this database called HappyDB, which is available. You just Google it and you'll find it. 100,000 answers to the question, "What made you happy yesterday?" from Amazon Mechanical Turk. Okay, actually 50,000 from "What made you happy yesterday?" 50,000 from "What made you happy in the last 3 months?" The answers are different because when people reflect on a longer time scale, they talk about different things. Okay, just to show you that Amazon Mechanical Turk has a very interesting collection of people. Here's the last one. A few weeks ago, I received a letter from the president of the university letting me know that I received tenure, promotion to associate professor. So there are a bunch of untenured professors working as Turkers at Amazon Mechanical Turk. I think I know who it is, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so it's a fascinating database, and it's a great database for like all kinds of experiments in NLP and stuff like that. It's also very happy to look at. There's a guy who started a Twitter account that all it does is randomly select a moment from HappyDB every day and tweets it out. 100,000, he's covered for a while. We did some field studies about Joe, but I will not go into that right now. So here's the thing. Suppose, building on your questions, suppose Joe figured me out. Okay, it knew what makes me happy. It understands where I am, what the weather is, what the activities around me are, what foods I like to eat. Now it's trying to help me, so it knows me perfectly. Okay. Now it's trying to find experiences for me, right? So now we're into that helper, this assistant that is going to just help me create these experiences that are going to make me happy all the time. Okay, so it might talk about the vacations that I'm trying to create, the outings, the restaurant outings, the social outings that I'm trying to create. Let's try to create these experiences for you. And now we discovered, if you actually start looking at this, is that if you look at search engines today, you can't actually create experiences. You can search for objective things. So here's an example that looks a little familiar. You're looking for a vacation in Helsinki. Okay? So yeah, you can go to booking.com and find hotels, and you can search on a bunch of filters, okay, on price, on location, but those are not that's not the experience that you're having. The experience that you're having is, are you going to be close to great cafes, to the attractions you want to go to? Is the staff friendly? Is the all these other things? Are the rooms clean? Are the breakfast good or whatever? These things are not. These things are mentioned in reviews, right? So you're not going to believe the hotel if it tells you that the breakfast is great, right? But you're going to believe people who actually had the breakfast there, right? So the thing is that all the experiential aspects of the services that we buy every day are available in reviews, but we can't search on them. We can't go and say, I want a hotel in the center of Helsinki with friendly staff, great breakfast, and close to this great cafe that I heard about. Okay? You can't do that. You can go through the hotels that Booking.com recommends and go into the reviews for each one and search for some clues about that. But that's very different. Then you're going to go to the 3 top hotels and you're going to give up after that, right? You can't search on them. That's the point that you're trying to make. So you can see that they're actually highlighting a bunch of stuff, right? So they're actually, Booking.com is actually trying to do something, right? They're trying to highlight some clauses from the reviews that might be very informative to you, but that's only after you did the search. It's saying you can't search on that. So that was the reason we started thinking about developing experiential search, which is this is the system that we demoed last week. So these are just examples of other verticals where you would like to do these searches. So I want a restaurant with a view of the Tokyo, in Tokyo, okay? A restaurant with a view of the sunset view of the Tokyo Tower. Okay, that's the experience I'm trying to create. I don't actually care which food I'm going to have as long as it's, have you ever had bad food in Tokyo? Never. Okay, so I just want a good view of the Tokyo Tower. Okay, but you can't search for that experience, right? Or I want a job where I can work with a dynamic set of people on social good. No, you can't. I tried, I couldn't find it. Or I want a 1-week course on Python with short programming exercises. That's the experience that I want to have, right? That's the thing that I'm looking for. So if you look at most of the verticals that we actually shop for, you can search on objective aspects of those things, like the price, the location, what are you going to learn at the end of the day, but you can't search on the experiential things that actually make all the difference. And if you, well, why is it so hard? As I said, the content is, if it exists, it's in reviews, which means it's in natural language, which means you need to solve a whole bunch of natural language problems. It means who do you believe, right? I'm not necessarily going to believe any person, right? I want people that I sort of trust or have some commonality with me, so I would understand that their review means something for me. Experiences are nuanced, okay? I'm a database guy, okay? I'm a very laid-back database guy, okay? Databases, everything has to fit into these very specific, well-defined columns, right? Attributes. But experiences, they're mushy, right? They're not as clear as a database, as a row in a database. But mostly also they're subjective. So there's no ground truth about whether about an experience, right? Is the staff at the hotel friendly? I think so. Maybe somebody else will think differently. Are the rooms clean? To a guy, yes. To a woman, not sure. So everything depends on who's looking at it. Okay, and we don't have, and so I'll make a very clear declaration here. We don't have a way in databases of modeling subjective data. Every database ever built by mankind was built on objective data. There is a ground truth. There's something in the world that is either true or false, and that's what you're putting in the database. But maybe the database doesn't know what it is. Maybe the database has the wrong entry, but there is a truth. And our query language, SQL, only says yes or no. The tuples aren't in the middle. When you have subjective data, right, there's no truth. You gotta go with the flow. And actually, much of what we deal with in life is subjective views of everything, right? So that's so this is the demo that we had. So you can see, how am I doing on time? Still 15 minutes. Still 15 minutes. Okay.
10 minutes.
So I'll compress the last hour and a half into 15 minutes. No problem. So this is the demo that we gave. You can see here that in the search bar, you can write things like has really clean rooms. Okay, so that's the other thing in subjective data, right? You're using all kinds of expressions that are different. I might say clean, you might say really clean, like very, very clean, immaculate, whatever. Every person writes these things differently. They mean things that are very close, but that's not the way databases work. In a database, if you want to get an answer, you got to use the right words. When you have subjective data, there is no right words. Everything goes. Okay. Now, before you ask, somebody's going to ask, what do we do today to find these things, right? We go to the place where we can enter anything, right? It's called Google. So you can say, you can actually go to Google and say anything you want, right? But what you get back is sometimes you'll get back a set of hotels. Sometimes you'll get back just a bunch of pages. But it's a one-shot deal, right? And you can't start refining your queries, right? You can't say, I'm looking for a hotel with clean rooms and friendly staff. Okay, each query, Google doesn't look at your query as a query to a database. It looks at your query as a query to a bunch of documents, and it doesn't understand that one query is a refinement of another. It just gives you the best result it can. So what we do is we go to Google to find stuff, and then we go to booking.com to book stuff, right? Or the more common example is if you're shopping on Amazon, you will actually look for the reviews on Google and then go to Amazon to shop. Okay, neither Amazon nor Google are very happy with this. Okay, I can tell you that much. So, so the thing is, there's still this dichotomy in search between structured objects and objective information and unstructured queries about anything that give you possibly a bunch of web pages. Okay, but when we're searching for experiences, at least every time I search for going on a trip, I'm spending a huge amount of time just putting together pieces of information from different sites, and it drives me crazy. Okay. So the main technical challenge that we dealt with in Voyageur is dealing with subjective data. Okay. We also when you're showing results about a hotel, you may want to show clauses from the reviews that might be very useful for you. Okay, based on what you're looking for, maybe something will tell you, you can find parking, free parking 2 blocks down the street, or this is like the oldest hotel in San Francisco. That might interest you. Okay, but let's focus on the subjective data. Actually, we did a study again with Mechanical Turk, and we went through a bunch of verticals: hotels, restaurants, vacations, college admissions, and we asked people, what are you interested in? What are the aspects of these services that you're actually interested in when you search for these verticals? Okay, and then we had somebody go and figure out whether something is objective or subjective, and it turns out that the vast majority of attributes that people care about in these verticals are subjective. Okay, so the world is a subjective place, and that's what people. I think I've made this point. Okay, let's move on. Cool. So what has the world done about subjective data? So now we're going to talk about how we can model subjective data in databases. So every good talk needs a pie chart where you're going up and to the right? So turns out you can have subjective data and you can have subjective queries. Okay, and those are two separate things. So the vast majority of databases today are objective data, objective queries on objective data. Give me a hotel in Amsterdam for less than 180 euro. No problem. Database community has solved that problem. Okay. You can also ask for subjective queries on objective data. Give me a hotel in Amsterdam with reasonable price. Reasonable is very subjective, right? But it's in the query, it's not in the data. So that you can take care of with a visualization. You can show them, here are the prices, you decide what's reasonable, maybe compare it to other European capitals, whatever. The data is there, so now you can visualize it in a way that will take care of your subjective issues. Okay? The other one is subjective data but objective queries. So this is what we do with restaurants, right? We give them a star rating. So we take all the subjective data that we have on, in reviews, and we reduce it into numbers, okay? Thereby losing the vast number of information. But it simplifies us. We're humans. We need simplicity, right? So now we go to whatever, Yelp or whatever, and we ask for restaurants with ratings of 4.5 or more. We were feeling good. We dealt with subjective data, okay, by losing most of the information. So we've objectified it in some way. But what we want to do with the system that we developed is restaurants that serve delicious food. We want subjective queries on subjective data. Okay, so that's us. I already said this. Everything is personal, everything is nuanced, so it's hard to do. Okay? This is an example. So if you're looking at why is this hard? Is because people use very different linguistic forms to describe the same thing, or slightly different things, right? So you can have breakfast is average, breakfast was very delicious and had many options, food was great for breakfast. Those are very different linguistic ways of describing things that may or may not be similar to each other. But that's the problem. We don't, in databases, we don't deal with that, right? We don't have a way of taking linguistic statements and putting them into a database in a way that we can query. So how do we deal? This is the core problem. Okay, the natural language processing community has actually recognized that subjectivity is an issue for many, many years. So Janet Swiebek, a well-known researcher in natural language who actually passed away last year, she started this whole line of research in the NLP community, and there's actually a beautiful annotated bibliography on her webpage that shows you dozens and dozens of papers on subjectivity in natural language. But what they've done is they've looked for how to recognize something in language that is subjective, okay, that is expressing an opinion rather than a fact. Okay, that's really hard, and it has all kinds of other ramifications. But from a database point of view, it's like the retrieval problem. So they solved the problem of finding a piece of text in a corpus that talks about a subjective observation. Okay, databases need to do joins. Databases need to do aggregation over many, many pieces of data. That's the part that we're trying to solve in our subjective databases. Okay. Okay, so we call the system OpineDB. Opine is to express an opinion about something. Actually, we wanted it to be opine, but there's actually a beautiful paper by a colleague of mine, Oren Etzioni, 20 years ago, that stole that name, and so we had to add the DB. So this is how we solve it, and I'll be very, very brief about this. Okay, so essentially, it's a database. Okay, some of the columns, like the hotel name and the capacity, how many rooms you have, are like a traditional database. But you're going to have columns that are subjective attributes. So these are things that don't have ground truth. Okay, but you're going to try to find the statements in the reviews that express these things and aggregate them. Okay, so how much time do I have? I'm not sure how.
5-10 minutes.
5-10 minutes. So when you talk about here, let's go to the next slide. See what this has. So in a database system, right? Every column has a data type. Can be an integer, can be a string, can be a date, something like that. In a subjective attribute, the data type is a set of expressions. So if your column is room cleanliness is a subjective piece of data. So the data type for that is ways that people talk about cleanliness in text. Okay, so it can be very clean, pretty clean, average, stained carpet, dirty, quite dirty, stuff like that. Now we don't enumerate them in advance. We actually get those, we collect those from the corpus itself. So it's not like somebody needs to sit there and design that. Okay, but this is the domain that people these are the linguistic expressions that people use in order to talk about room cleanliness. And then what we do is we design a set of markers. Let's see if this is coming. So marker summaries are the way we're going to aggregate this stuff. So now you're going to have, for example, room cleanliness. You're going to have things like, now a designer comes in and says, look, for room cleanliness, we're going to have these markers. Very clean, average, dirty, and very dirty. These are going to be the markers. This is what the system will maybe show to its users. And now what it does, it takes these linguistic expressions and maps them to those markers. So for example, rooms are pretty clean might give a weight to average and to very clean. Okay? So we're taking these linguistic expressions and mapping them in a weighted fashion to different markers. That's in a nutshell what we do. Let me run to the queries. Okay, so let's take one example query and see how this works. Okay, so suppose you're looking for rooms with less than 150 euros, has really clean rooms, and is a romantic getaway. Okay? So the first thing we do is we interpret the predicate. So users can write anything they want. Really clean rooms, romantic getaway, whatever, right? So they're not limited by the schema. So the system, OpineDB, what it does is it looks at these predicates and says, can I find an element in the schema that answers this? So if I say really clean rooms, right? So I have an attribute called room cleanliness. Fine. Let's go and answer that using room cleanliness. But romantic getaway, I don't have in my schema. And that's the other thing about subjective database. You're not going to have everything in your schema because what people ask about won't fit into your schema. But I noticed that in reviews, people that mention romantic also talk about exceptional service and luxurious bathrooms. So maybe those are correlated to romantic. So I'm going to find you hotels that have those aspects. It's not a perfect answer, okay? But it's some approximation using some linguistic knowledge that I've gleaned from reviews, okay? And then we put together all these predicates with a fuzzy join, which I won't talk about today. Anyway, so those are the ideas of subjective database. I want to end on one important story. Okay, so give me 3 minutes here. There's an article that I wrote, an opinion piece. It's not a reviewed article. It's an opinion piece that I wrote for the Data Engineering Bulletin a couple of months ago. So we talked about subjective data. And my claim is that subjectivity is actually everywhere in the way we process data. This is not news, okay? This is me reading a bunch of books. But the point is that when we build systems that enable people to make decisions, we don't actually take subjectivity into account. Okay? So I already told you that data can be subjective. Okay? This is something that the database community has not looked at all so far. Okay? But there are two other places where subjectivity is prevalent. One is the presentation, and the second is decision making. So when you make a presentation of data, you're not giving all the details. You're already shaping the presentation in a very, very subjective way to try to convince people of your opinion. Sometimes that's an okay thing to do. But sometimes it can be done in a very manipulative way, right? And have bad consequences. So what does it mean for us? So this is a scientific question, right? What does it mean to understand the subjectivity of a presentation? What does it mean that when you're presenting data in some way, you're doing something wrong? You're hiding some important details. Okay, so the example that I give in the paper is somebody saying, you know, the unemployment in the United States has gone down since Donald Trump took office. If you actually look at the data, it's been going down since the second month of the Obama administration. Okay, so saying that it's been going down since Trump is extremely misleading. That's a place where, in some sense, yes, it's correct, but it's misleading. What does it mean to give a presentation of data that is faithful, not misleading? Okay, we don't actually, I don't know of any work on that. I'm sure there is some. Okay, there's actually a much more interesting example. But let's go into decision making. Okay, we'd like to think that if we just had all the facts, we could make decisions easily, right? That everything is fact-based, right? Yeah, right. He's telling me, yeah, right. Okay? No, we're extremely emotional beings. Okay? And actually, from neuroscience, we know that if the emotional part of our brain is disconnected from our rational part, we have no clue how to choose an item from a restaurant menu. Okay? But we don't actually take that into consideration in our data manipulation systems, in our data visualizations. How can we understand, or how can we help people understand where their emotions are playing a big role in their decision, and when they're not, or how to balance that? Okay, often when we're looking at a decision that we're trying to make, and there's so many possibilities, there's no way we can look at all the options. So we need our emotions in order to cut down those set of options, right? But sometimes that's not optimal. Sometimes we're actually missing out on really good options if we're just letting our emotions take control. How do we even think about that? How do we create systems that help us make decisions that balance our emotions and facts? I think it's a fascinating question. So I think this is almost my closing statement. Every data scientist should understand how data is used and perceived and how decisions are made. So if you actually, the article that I wrote that you can Google and find, it's actually on medium.com too, I read a bunch of fascinating books that I highly recommend to everybody. I don't have the answers in my article. I'm just asking questions. It's like a very glorified book report. Okay, it's a 4-page article. You can read it before you go to sleep. But all the fields of behavioral economics, psychology, neuroscience, they tell us things that we need to connect to the data systems that we're building, and we're not doing that yet. Okay, so my final, whoa, I guess not. Oops, yep. My final statement is taken from the Design Museum in Helsinki from yesterday, where I found this quote that says, "A question that is still relevant is how important is it to provide mental well-being with the means of design? How do you feel about this?" This is taken from your museum, okay? I think it's relevant to what I talked about today. So I'll leave it there, and we can discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you, Alon, for really exciting presentation. Before opening the comments to the audience, I have a question.
Go for it.
What do you think are the, let's say, most difficult challenges for information technology to address this issue you have been investigating now in the presentation of reckoning on the subjective in the data?
I think you need to do it with existing systems. Okay, so you can't start developing a completely new system and expect it to take over the world. Where is it that you can make small changes that actually make a big difference? Okay, so for example, so that's why I was really happy when we discovered the problem on experience search. Here's a search problem which we're working on all the time, right? And thousands of engineers are working on all over the world. But here's a new aspect to it, that if you actually put a bunch of really good search people at Google or Bing or whatever on this, they will find stuff to do. So asking the question and trying to incorporate this into an existing system, I think is the key. So when we started, we were talking about happiness and well-being. Let's make people happy with technology. All of a sudden, we turned it into a search problem that I could, if you gave me a few engineers at Google, we could do very cool stuff. You just have to ask the right questions, have the users and the data.
Thank you, Alon. So let's take 2 questions, and then we can continue the questioning with the breakfast outside. Thank you. Some questions, more questions from the audience. You were quieted by my request to go on with the presentation. Sorry about that. Yes?
Okay, so I really like the second part of the talk because then it sort of turned this whole problem into an engineering problem, which is kind of interesting. But I want to sort of go back to the first part because then,
By the way, psychologists are very cool people. You should hang out with psychologists.
So what I wanted to know was, we started with the second part with the premise that if we are able to sort of suggest new experiences to people, it would make them more happy. Did you guys run some experiments to sort of actually validate that part? In the sense that if some human curators did what the machine was supposed to do, did it actually make the subjects happy?
So we didn't do that in our work, but this is stuff that positive psychologists have been working on and verified in many, many ways.
Right, because then it is also possible that the way the system suggests these experiences may or may not. Like, so I'm still curious about if you had, after you had developed the system, did you sort of run the experiments that you sort of started?
No, so the Voyageur engine is a demo, and basically what we did was we solved the technical problems. So now you can do the searches, find me a hotel with clean rooms and whatever. We didn't actually do user experiments on that. No.
Thank you. One more question before the breakfast. Here we go.
Thank you for very inspiring presentation. So how this search for experiences relate to exploratory research, this kind of work, I was wondering, because there is this recent work on exploratory research that goes a little bit in this direction, that people don't know exactly what to search for. Like the people get insight on the different things that but I see some connections. I was wondering if you could.
So I'm not completely up on exploratory research, but I think there are similarities. So what happens when you're searching for experiences, you don't actually know what you're searching for, right? So I'm looking to have fun in Bali, okay? I don't actually know what questions to ask about Bali, right? I haven't been there.
That's a problem to
right.
System that addresses product research. So they get those kind of ideas of the key terms, and so they can explore and become more aware of what they could possibly do in Bali. Like searching for crowdsourcing for people who doesn't know, and they get also human computation, they get mechanical Turk, they get like those different directions.
Right.
Help them understand better.
But I think here it could be a little more guided. So if I'm looking for, if I enjoy outdoor activities, okay? So now in Bali there are certain outdoor activities that are there, right? So I'm giving you some guidance as to what I'm looking for, right? But you should be able to help me explore in that vertical or in that category. But in some way it's also orthogonal, right? Because you're looking for I think exploratory research is sort of independent of whether you're looking for experiences or objects, right? Maybe I'm looking for a toaster. Like, what are the kind of toasters that you have, right? I don't even know what questions to ask about a toaster. And so in some ways, right, there are the attributes of the toaster that you don't know to ask. I mean, sorry, toasters are a really bad example, but televisions.
This could be seen like a specific instance, like a more related experiences.
But I think the problem is better defined when you have a set of objects that have attributes. Okay, then you can give people guidance as to which attributes they might. Maybe you care about the battery life. Okay, I didn't know to ask that question. In experiences, the attributes are so nuanced and many and subjective. So that's still a very different take on the problem. Okay?
Thank you, Alon. So let's thank Alon again